Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us for another episode of Lackawanna Pastimes. I'm Sarah Pacini, the Assistant Director at the Lackawanna Historical Society. Today, we're joined by our neighbors at the University of Scranton, who'll be talking about our Scranton Story, Our Nation's Story project. The program was funded by an NEH grant that was received in the summer of 2021. It's an ongoing multi-year, multi-part program. The Historical Society has partnered on many of their events. There's a continuing events through the end of this year, and also an ongoing oral history component. Today, we're joined with Kimberly Crafton of Crafton Cultural Management, who's a respected leader in cultural heritage and arts projects, focusing on connecting people to their forgotten histories, to their ancestors, to their neighbors, their communities, and the world. She's coordinating the oral histories portion of the Scranton Story, Our Nation's Story project. Also joining us is Julia Schumacher-Cohen, who is the Assistant Vice President for Community Engagement and Government Affairs at the University of Scranton. She chairs their community-based learning board and coordinates various special initiatives, including serving as project director of the Scranton Story, Our Nation's Story project. She's currently completing her PhD at Temple University in political science with a focus on American and comparative politics and political theory. Kim and Julie will be talking a little bit about this project itself and the oral history component as a way to share Scranton stories and compare them to the broader national story. So ladies, I'll turn the program over to you.
Great. Thank you so much, Sarah. I'm going to share the screen in a minute, and I'm going to start off a little bit with just an overview of the project. I'll just kind of pick up on what Sarah was sort of laying out, and then Kimberly is going to talk a little bit more about the oral histories component. But first of all, I want to just thank Sarah and Marianne. The Historical Society has been a wonderful partner on this project from day one, and of course we always appreciate their being our neighbor on campus. So again, just want to thank Sarah and Marianne for all their collaboration. So let me go ahead and see if this will work. I will pull up my screen. Okay, here we go. And I'll do this. Okay. So we'll go on to this. So as Sarah talked about, this is we were thrilled, honestly, to be funded by the National Endowment for the Humanities. I think it is something we should all take pride in, because it was a wonderful grant to receive and to have the city of Scranton and all of the partners recognized. It was a humanities discussion grant. I can't remember exactly. I'll have to go back and I can't recall how many grants, but we were awarded, I think of a few in the time in that year of 2021. It's technically a humanities discussions grant. So a lot of what we've been doing over the last year and a half is actually programming, lectures and discussions and story exchanges. But the culmination of it will be this oral history collection, which we really feel will be, I think, in many ways, the lasting asset that will be both for the university, but obviously for the broader community. But so very basically, we kind of made this claim. we all, kind of, I think, pride ourselves that Scranton has a bit of everything and is sort of the center of the universe. I will say I'm not from Scranton originally. I've been here about 13 years. I've worked at the university for about 11 of those. I'm a Hill Section resident. I moved here from the New York area. I've been in Washington, D.C. Previously to that. But very early on in my time here, I had found Scranton to be an exceptional place, like a place of community, of stories, of resilience, of history, and I think it has something really special. So as someone who's not from here, I take pride in it, and that was part of my own thinking in putting the grant together. But it was a very collaborative process of putting the application together, and I liked it. It was right during that time that you'll all recall of when COVID had hit. It was the fall of 2020, and we didn't have all that much to do. We found out about this grant and spent a lot of time on Zooms and put the application together, and then found out in the summer of 2021 that we had received it. So again, exciting, and making this claim that Scranton has something that is iconic as an American city, and it's experienced many of the key elements of our nation's experience. And so what can we do, and what can we say about the national experience from our own vantage point in the city of Scranton? So what we've done with the themes and with the programs, and what we want to do with the oral histories, is to explore both longstanding stories and histories, which of course the Lackawanna Historical Society has already done in many ways, as well as underrepresented stories. And so we've done some programming on the Indigenous history and experience, recent immigrant and refugees, Black experiences here in the city of Scranton, which of course our partner, the Black Scranton Project, is really the lead on that, and they're part of the project as well. The National Endowment for the Humanities is specifically focused on this idea of a more perfect union, obviously coming from the preamble to the Constitution, but the themes, what they were looking for in putting the grant out there was how can communities kind of reflect on the 250th anniversary of the United States in this run-up time. So it's going to be in 2026. So we have a few years still. So these grants were all meant to have, programming going on all over the country to really think about that and reflect on that. And what can we do as communities to help forward that? We know that we still have much more to do to become a truly just, a truly pluralistic, multiracial democracy. So those are the sort of big questions that are part of the project. As we kind of have gone through more specific themes. I won't touch on all of these. I'll give you a few highlights again of some of the programs that we've done already. Almost all the programs that we've done have been recorded because we do want them to themselves, the programs that we've done, the speakers that we brought in to be assets so that they're videotaped and they can be part of the project, into part of the archives kind of into the future. So these are the 8 themes that we had laid out when we put the application in. The first one was Portrait of Scranton, Portrait of a Nation, but really it was the idea of Scranton in the popular imagination. So how does Scranton show up nationally? And is that way that we are portrayed, authentic and true? Or do we sometimes get sort of portrayed in ways that may not be as authentic as we might want? So we kind of reflected on that theme for the first couple of events. That was back in the fall of 2021. The U.S. citizen and the American founding was the second theme, and the last theme. Those were themes that were just helping us think again about what is our role as citizens in a democracy? What is our role as members of a local community? Sort of civic engagement. Again, that's sort of been more of a meta part of the project. And then we've really dug into these very specific pieces of our history, pieces of our story, our past, present, and future. And so we've had wonderful programs on the Indigenous history of Northeastern Pennsylvania. Our colleague Adam Pratt in the history department has been one of the leaders on that. We did a number of programs, and of course, this is you are all no strangers to the idea of Scranton being the place where the Industrial Revolution obviously built the city, and then thinking a little bit about, where do we go from here? The city, I don't know that we knew that the city was going to be withdrawing from out of Act 47 when we put the grant in. So maybe that was some sort of act of faith or hope. But I'll highlight a couple of the events that we had in that theme, from immigrant to citizen. So thinking about the immigration stories of our city. We're currently on the theme, the Underground Railroad to Black Scranton. It happens to also be Black History Month. I'll mention an event that we have coming up. And then in the spring, our last sort of specific theme will be the religious and ethnic tapestry. And we won't get into it too much, but we have a very exciting places of worship bus tour that's going to be happening later in the spring that I think many of you will be interested in attending. And then the final theme will really be attempting to bring all of this together to think about what have all these conversations and all this exploration, what does it all mean, and how, and really the presentation of the final oral histories. I do want to just give credit again to this was I think when we first announced the project in the summer of 2021, you can see some friends and colleagues here, and I've listed a number of the partners. So the Black Scranton Project, the Center for the Living City, Lackawanna County Arts and Culture, the Scranton Area Ministerium, and more than even is presented here. WVIA has been a wonderful media partner. So while we certainly take pride in it as a project that's come out of the University of Scranton, as we have led it to some extent, it's very, very collaborative, and it really builds on things that lots of people were doing already, but we were sort of able to put it together into one package. As I mentioned, these are the kinds of events that we've done. So lots of things that were, more typical lectures and panels, but we've also done walking tours. We're going to do this experiential bus tour in the spring. We've had film screenings. We have one more film screening that's part of our Black History theme coming up on Sunday on Jim Crow of the North, that will be talking about racial discrimination and racial disparities in housing nationally. And then we'll talk a little bit about what that has looked like locally. So these are the kind of the different types of events that we've had. And then just briefly, these are some of the highlights so far. The portrait of, as I mentioned, that Scranton in the popular imagination. We had a keynote panel to start things off. We had a walking tour of Lackawanna Avenue that fall. We did roundtable discussions all around that theme of, again, how is Scranton portrayed? Who are we really? What's missing in that portrayal? And one of the things that we talked about is that sometimes Scranton is portrayed as a city that's not very diverse for instance. And as we know, Scranton is growing in its diversity. So that was one of the things that we brought out that fall. In the spring, we talked about some of the just kind of broader issues in terms of thinking about who we are as citizens and our responsibilities in a community and in a democracy. Last spring and fall, we had many events, so I won't touch on all of them. You can see Bob Walensky up there on the left. The Historical Society was really critical in helping us to make that happen. That was a wonderful program looking at the 1902 anthracite strike and the anniversary of that. And he raised some really important aspects. And, you know, one of the things that we've tried to think about in all of it is where has Scranton also made a mark as something that's happened here has been really important for the nation. And I think obviously that was one of those events that was critical to labor history, critical to industrial history, and just when we think about all the rights that we have as workers, all those things. And it took place in the room in Lackawanna County Courthouse where those strike hearings took place. So that was a wonderful event. In the middle is the program that we did with Curtis Zuniga, who is the co-director and co-founder of the Lenape Center, a member of the Delaware Tribe of Indians. So someone who is a descendant of one of the original nations that obviously we stand on here at the land that we are on today. He came and presented a talk on the experience of forced removal and what that looked like, and the pushing of the Lenape people all the way west to Oklahoma. So he resides mostly in Oklahoma, but the Lenape Center is based in New York City. So that was a wonderful program. We are building hopefully a long-standing relationship with the Lenape Center so that we will hopefully have him back again. On the right were some programs that we did around migration stories and really inviting people into both, longstanding Scranton residents, but also immigrants and refugees who are coming from Latin America, all across Latin America, as well as global refugees. We have many in the city of Scranton from the Democratic Republic of Congo, from Bhutan, from Syria, from Afghanistan, obviously now Ukraine. There has been a longstanding Ukrainian, someone was talking earlier, but obviously now coming, unfortunately, from the conflict there now. So these are some of the things that we've done in the actual programming that has tried to, bring out some of the ideas of the project. And then we've had alongside of that a story collection process that's going to now culminate in, we've had a campaign, I'll let Kim talk about this, and then this more formal collection and presentation of Scranton stories that attempts to bring the project together, all these different themes, all these different events, but then what are we sort of left with? And that's what we hope to do with sharing the stories through an oral history project. So I'll let Kim just tell me when you want to advance the slide, and then we'll go from there.
Sounds great. It's so good to see so many friends and familiar faces. We're delighted you could all join in with us today to learn about another telling of stories. And of course, that's what the Historical Society has been engaged with and involved in for so long, is how do we facilitate the fact that not only do we have an enormous history behind us, but each day we're all living a current moment of history. We are living history each day all together. So the idea of the Scranton stories is, again, as Julie was saying, trying to be, very interactive with the public. We really want to, at the end of a beautiful 2-year program of discussions and movement around the city and ways to stop and contemplate ourselves from many different viewpoints, we really want to have what we are calling a collective voice at the end of that, almost like a snapshot of who we, as people living and working in and around Scranton, who we feel we are at this moment in time. With all this enormous history behind us, who are we now? And what are our hopes for what's coming up, leading into the 250th anniversary of our nation? What role do we still have to play when we played such a pivotal role in the founding and the development of our nation? So it's an exciting invitation to extend to the community to add their voices to this ongoing group telling of their recollections and stories and things that mean a lot to them. But it's also a way to try to encourage our friends and neighbors to take part in this, because it's only as strong as the voices that choose to participate in that. So that's what this I Am Scranton campaign was about. We have various classes within the university are going out into different areas of the community. For instance, we had earlier on, we had someone in the intern that came in and spent time in the Lebanese community in West Side and was doing some interviews and kind of profiles of people there. Currently, we have a wonderful offshoot of students in Dr. Pavlik's class that are going into the Gino Murley Center to really engage with the residents there and help present and preserve their stories, not only for their families, but for the community at large, that we remember always, what their role in the international story has been through their service. And so through many different student-based interactions, but we also have direct community to community interactions as well. So all through the spring and fall of last year, we were, and you may have seen us out in the public from time to time at different public events, we set up what we called the Scranton Stories booth. And we were there just with information about the program and to let people know, to tell their families, their friends, their neighbors, that there's a program that wants to hear from you. And so it was really a wonderful way to get out and let people know that we were there and that we want to hear from you, from each of you. Okay, Julie. So one of the things that we did, in addition to encouraging people to share their stories, was to just gather a visual representation, because it's one thing to tell, but it's another thing to see all the beautiful faces and how they feel about that title, I Am Scranton. What does it mean? It's such an odd phrase, I am Scranton. And it brings out something wonderful. So through that, we have had a wonderful library collected of various people engaging with us at these wonderful story gathering events. Okay. We included at the very beginning, just to kind of kick things off, an invitation to many dear friends to add their story, their photo, and then just like a little blurb, something that tells a little bit about who you are and what Scranton means to you. So Scranton was brought to light by Sarah. I love it. I gained a deeper appreciation for the city rather than, complaints and criticisms of it being a dying coal town. And talking about the restoration and, wonderful to see young professionals and people from all over the world continuing to move into the city. There's excitement and passion in the city, and people are more positively engaged and vocal than ever before. So that's Sarah's experience with it. But we have been very careful to say that, this is not a program that we're trying to be cheerleaders of Scranton. We are trying to be recorders of people's experiences in Scranton. We want people to use their own words, and sometimes the story comes out and it's a positive story, but there are, as any city, as any area, there's many challenges that we face as well. So the invitation is really to tell your very real Scranton story, which could be full of challenges, it could be frustrations, it could be triumphs, whatever your true story is what we're looking to engage with. Another one was Christina Manuel. Is it Manuel or Manuel? I apologize. So I hope either one of
I think
those.
it's Manuel. Manuel.
Okay.
Yeah. Sorry, I couldn't get my mouse.
This is someone who was raised in the Southwest Side, then left and came back after being away, at the Air Force and Japan, coming back and making it her home as an adult person, and her story of, wanting to really be part of the ongoing story, be part of the continuation of these next layers of history that we are all creating each day. And who else do we have here? And And Jenny Gonzalez, which is someone who has been working very closely, not only with the project, but in many facets throughout the city, to make a difference in her world. Her family were immigrants here, and to their community, when her family first moved here, it was described as a ghost town. And they had a number of challenges, being some of the first people from the Latina and Latino community to arrive. And they persevered and have built a multiple decades long story of their own here. And Jenny now has a daughter that she's raising that was born here in Scranton and is a true Scrantonian, born and living on and creating her story with her roots from Scranton. So there's so many different ways that we can look at the story that each one of us tells. And of course, we all have so many different stories, but if something comes to mind, we want to make sure to extend this invitation to you to add your story as well. And we'll explain how to do that at the end of the program. So I think one of the, and you can certainly scratch that website down too. It's scranton.edu/IamScranton. There are ways that you can add your story through video, through audio, or even just typing a few things in. This can be done on both social media as well as the website. And of course, email. If you are more comfortable mailing a letter or emailing, you can do that as well. So all of that information on how to interface is all at that website. So I think if that's the last screen, we can just close that. But I do want to continue to tell you the main focus, as Julie mentioned, is something that we're calling our spotlight stories. All of that interaction with the public is also leading up to a series of interviews that are going to be a little more in depth, almost like, different spotlight focuses on a few people. And, we're certainly not saying that this is the first time Scranton has ever told its stories, and it will certainly not be the last. But in this particular just way that we're presenting, we are trying to provide a broad brushstroke where we do two things. One is that we are trying to gather and collect stories that have been told in the past of Scranton, things that are ongoing, like currently ongoing. Neighbor Works of Northeastern Pennsylvania has a wonderful podcast where they're interviewing different people from their neighborhood. And so we want to make sure people are connecting to that. And so many of the different programs that the Historical Society has done in the past that have told stories of Scranton that have been so well done, we want to make sure to connect to all of the programs that neighbors and partners have done as well. So when they're coming to the Scranton Stories website, you're not only getting the projects that we're doing, you're also connecting to many, many, many voices that have been well preserved in the past, so that you have a nice depth of information and experiences to dive into. But for us, the focus really was, as Julie said, on trying to gather and preserve some of the stories that have not been told as many times historically. So while we are focusing on both long-standing communities, we're also trying to make sure that we give a voice to some of the newer communities or newer elements of Scranton's story that maybe have not been told as often in the past. So it's exciting in that realm, but it's very challenging because, of all of the arrays of how we present ourselves as human beings in a city as broad-based as Scranton, with its, how many different faith backgrounds do we have? How many different cultural backgrounds do we have? We have all the different neighborhoods and the different age ranges. It's important that we're hearing from people of all different age ranges as well. So it's a really exciting but very challenging endeavor to try to pick 20 to 25 or 30 stories from among the richness that Scranton presents. So what our hope is that in this time we will be able to conduct these interviews, and we have begun interviewing some people already, conduct these interviews, which the text of which will be all preserved at the Weinberg Memorial Library in the University of Scranton, so that for posterity it is documented. We have these voices presented and available for the future to really understand who we feel that we are at this point in history. But then we also will be making 5 to 10-minute videos that will be presented to the public later on, probably in the late fall of this year. And it's a celebration of who we are as Scranton, these different voices coming together to give a really unique perspective of our moment, of this moment, and who we are in history. So one other thing that we've been really excited that different offshoots have happened as we go along, like the project at Gino Murley, like the student working with the Lebanese population. Another one is that we have someone working, and they hopefully will be working in collaboration with the Historical Society also. But this is an intern from the Columbia University Oral History Program. And he's creating something called a sound walk that's kind of anchored in that area around Lackawanna Avenue that was so vital to our transportation story, our commerce story, and the movement in time of that area. He's creating what he calls a sound walk. That'll be an experience that people can have that will, again, as Julie said, last into the future, lasting asset rather than something that just disappears quickly as this time frame of the project is over. So I think I'll turn it back over to Julie, and we can also open it up to questions and answers or anything that Sarah wants to add to what we're doing.
Yeah, we can open it up for discussion. Sarah, you let us know what you'd like to do next.
Sure. Yeah, thanks for the information. One thing I did just wanted to clarify, I did put Kim, I put the link in the chat so everyone can access it. You mentioned, Jill, you mentioned that you recorded all of the previous programs. Are they all on that website, or are they on a YouTube channel? Where would we go to find the recordings of the programs?
Yes, I think we may have a University of Scranton YouTube channel that has all the Scranton story. I can email you afterwards, because otherwise if you go to just scranton.edu/Scranton story, that's like the main, then for all the past events, you can kind of go in, but it's not just one page. You have to sort of, know which one you're looking for. But I think, like, for instance, the Indigenous history, it would be under that theme and it would be under that event. So not every single event have we recorded, but we've tried to do as many as possible. Bob Walensky at the courthouse, if you missed that one, that was recorded.
Okay, yeah, just so people can find them if they can. I know there's at least George is not from the area, so George can tune in from Pittsburgh. And if anyone is interested.
And one thing I didn't mention, which is the program we just did on February 9th, and I know, Marianne, you were there, and that one I think is also really makes a big contribution. So I think just to highlight it for a second. So that was Glynis Johns from the Black Scranton Project talking about the history around the Adams Avenue neighborhood that had been predominantly African-American before it became Midtown Apartments. And so that was a really interesting program. It was jam-packed, and there will be more research to do on that, and I think more to come in terms of future projects, including potentially with our history department helping. But in the meantime, it was really an important, I think, contribution to sort of opening the dialogue on that. And so you can find that already. It's on the university YouTube channel, but again, we'll check it out and make sure we get you the links. But Black History and Housing in Scranton on February 9th with Glynis.
Very good, thank you. Does anyone have any questions? I will open it to comment. I did mute everyone before as we were getting started, so please unmute yourselves if you have questions to chime in.
I have a question. Are you interested in very old stories? I just finished working on somebody that was in Scranton in 1828 to 1843.
Are you going to be publishing that in some way that would be kind of what the strange word is, like, public facing? Is there a way that somebody could access it if they clicked on a link somewhere?
I don't know yet what I'm doing with it.
Okay. So I think yes would be the answer, if we can find a way to connect it through our resources page, because many tellings are wonderful, and if we can make a way to make sense of having it in our resource page, it would be great to have those voices also.
Okay,
Yeah, so,
Yeah,
so
we
I
might
think
be able
stay
to
in
help
touch
you with
is
a place to have it land online. The historical society might be able to help with that.
I wanted to know about the person who is doing the interviews, the Gino Murley Center. Are they looking for veteran stories primarily?
So yes, that is a specific class-based project with our communication students, and they're going to be sort of part of the I Am Scranton campaign, in which I think our hope is to release those on social media eventually, but they'll be part of our website as well. I think they kind of know who they are going to interview, but Kim, you've been part of some of those conversations, so you may know.
Yeah, I think they're coordinating that through the office at Gino Murley. The professor is working with the office at Gino Murley to kind of coordinate that. So we don't have as much, control over that as really the Gino Murley office does.
Well, I was wondering if they wanted to interview my uncle. He's turned 100 this year, or actually last November. And he's a World War II veteran. He fought in Europe, the Battle of the Bulge. He was at Normandy Beach. He fought in the Battle of the Rhone River. He has a lot of interesting stories about his experiences, and came back here and worked in the coal mines. And he is like, doesn't forget anything. If you met him, he was 100. You'd think he was like 20 years younger.
That's amazing. Is he at Gino Murley? Is he residing at Gino?
No, he still lives in his own house.
Okay, so he was okay. Let's you and I touch base privately about that, and we can, because I have your email, and we can talk about that for sure.
Okay.
And maybe you could be part of helping, preserve his story. Maybe you could do your own person. And we're really encouraging that family members to interview other family members and share those videos, because there's no way that, one small project can do that. But if we can encourage people to inside of their own families and inside of their own communities, really help that storytelling process, then it's richer for all of us. So I'll give you some ideas on how you maybe can help do that.
I have a question, or I have more of a comment, I guess. I recently, maybe in the past few months, attended a presentation that was done on the garment industry in our area. I'm sure that was part of this whole entire program, and it was excellent. And the reason it struck a note with me, and I never thought of this going into it, but obviously during it and afterwards, was that my mother worked in the garment industry many years ago. So to know that almost everybody who lives in Scranton can relate in some way to the fabric that we make up is important. And I think that's, that it should be conveyed that way. Everybody has some way that they can connect to some part of our history. And they may not think so, because I didn't going into the program, but it was very well done. And that was on the garment industry. So I just had that comment.
Thank you for that. And I think many of us know Maureen McGuigan. That was her documentary. I mean, I know she collaborated with others, but yeah, I mean, as somebody who was a transplant here, I didn't know very much about the garment industry. We hear a lot about coal mining, which is, I mean, importantly and legitimately, but I think it is a little bit lesser told, and just the number of women and how big the industry was, and and the way that it really came in and at that critical time when coal was declining. So I think that's a wonderful asset. That documentary exists, and it's available online, and it's something that we just wanted to elevate through the project. So I'm glad you were able to be there.
Also, on a more personal note, I myself was born and raised in Scranton, but moved away for 35 years and came back. And it had everybody's eyes widened. They said, "Why you came back?" But I did. And, maybe my story can fit in somewhere here, but I see it entirely different as an adult, through adult eyes. And just the architecture alone is awesome to me. So it was a good decision for me. When my husband said to me after traveling for so many years, "We're ready to retire. Where do you want to go?" I said, "I want to go home." after all those years of living away. So maybe I could fit in somewhere with the story.
That would be great. What's really interesting is hearing, there are so many variations of that, who found richness in home that never left it, who found richness in home because they were in other places and they had a deeper understanding and appreciation on returning home. And even our pride as a region is talking about our immigration story. And what this project is showing is that that is not a point of history, that is a point of continuation in so many beautiful ways. All of that pride that we have in our, Marianne and Sarah are so good to talk about the waves of immigration, for what reasons were different people coming, and that rolling never stops. There's always new things happening in the world, as Julie mentioned, again, Ukrainian people coming here when their initial wave was much earlier, but again, we find people arriving. So to bring what we felt was a historic aspect of Scranton into our present and into our beautiful future is a really exciting aspect of this project to me.
I do have a question now that I'm thinking of it. When mentioned that the Black people lived on Adams Avenue and then they built apartment buildings there. What happened to the Black people? Where did they go?
Yeah, so Glynis talked about, there were different experiences. Sometimes they relocated them into other apartments sort of nearby. And the two interviews that we've done so far for Norma Jeffries, her family had to find their own place. They moved somewhere sort of not far away. They eventually moved back when Midtown was built, and then didn't stay there and moved on. Kathy Ann Hardaway in her interview talked about how they had owned a home. The home was, demolished, and then they were not able to go and build and buy another home. They moved into Midtown, which is rental apartments, so lost that home ownership aspect. So it really depended on the family, but there was not a systematic relocation. So that was a lot of the concern that was raised. If you're doing this sort of for the Black community, then there's not even a plan kind of to where people are going to be relocated. And then people who were, sometimes they felt that the housing was less quality than what had been before. But the impact altogether is that there had been more cohesion in the community being there, and then people were really dispersed. So so that's that. There's a big loss of those community memories. And both Norma and Kathy talked about businesses and places that they went, Jack's and Eddie's and these different shops, and a Jewish owned a dress shop that their mom worked in. All those, those are just things that I've never heard of. They don't exist anymore, but they were very much in their memory of that neighborhood. So.
And they were both very careful to say, it certainly wasn't the only place that people of color lived in the city, but it was a very vibrant center that was multi-racial, multi-ethnic. Kathy talked about, open to all were the Progressive Center, the JCC, and the CYC. She said, we all had access to all of that all of the time. And, her question is, yeah, I understand that progress has to happen, but it was a fully functioning, integrated, beautiful neighborhood that set the tone for her life. Why did they have to destroy it? So, it's really deep, hard questions, but so there wasn't any one particular place, but that's a really poignant story of a specific neighborhood within Scranton.
So basically they remained in Scranton, but just scattered around different places. They were relocated to the Black, but they remained in Scranton. It isn't that they went to, I don't know, some town or to New Jersey or,
That would have depended on I think more of the opportunities job wise in many cases. It was also it was corresponding at a time in Scranton where there were less jobs at that time all across. So percentage wise, the jobs for people of color were even less than that. So many people left at that point. They used that as a reason to be able to, if we have to move anyway, let's see what our options are.
Yeah.
And one thing I'll just mention real quickly was that we actually found in the university archives, and Glynis had found this also in her newspaper research. Part of the reason that the community was sort of living sort of in a central way, there was sort of positives and also other negative reasons for it, was that it was very difficult for a Black individual or family to rent or buy outside of that center city. They would try to do that, and the realtors, and we have this both from a university project that was done in the late 60s and newspaper articles that would say, we would go to the realtor, we would try to buy or rent somewhere, and they would say, well, we have to check with the neighbors first. We don't know if they want to have Black neighbors. And then it would sort of come back, well, it's not available anymore. And so that was sort of a practice. It was informal. I don't think we don't think that Scranton had, for instance, racial covenants where you actually had things written down on paper saying that this house cannot be sold or rented to a Black family, or in cases in other parts of the country, sometimes Jewish families too. We're going to be talking about this on Sunday with the screening of the Jim Crow of the North. And Scranton we've never found an official redlining map, which is also a piece of racial discrimination, but we definitely found evidence, and there's more research to do of these practices where people would try to go and locate themselves in a different part of Scranton, and they wouldn't be able to do that.
Speaking of other communities, our friend Tori Watkins is chiming in from New Jersey in the comments box. Tori is usually our go-to representative for anything Hyde Park and Welsh. So I know in our long process of trying to narrow down which stories we're telling, which interviews we're doing, I think we may have bandied Tori's name about at some point. He's usually our go-to storyteller. But again, I know Kim said it earlier and Julie said it about ways to record your own stories and record family member stories. Please email the Historical Society. We could pass your information on to help become a part of this storytelling. Because again, I think most of the hard part of this is just trying to narrow it down, rather than trying to find stories to tell. There's hundreds of thousands of them, and they're all wild. So just trying to narrow it down to a few rather than the many. All right. Again, thank you, Kim and Julie, for joining us. This is a long time project. I know you've been working on it very hard, and the work will continue for at least another year yet. We will send out those links to everyone so you're able to access it. I'll put it in the chat in the description section on the YouTube page as well, so you can access that. Thank you again for joining us. Stay tuned for our next program at the end of March. We'll be joined with our high school students from Valley View and Riverside High Schools, talking about the Historical Society's annual You Live Here, You Should Know This local history game show. Many of the students at this point are actually siblings of students who started it years ago, so there's a bit of a family tradition there. So they'll be talking about their experiences with the game show and also offering up hopefully some sample questions as they finalize the show for this year. So please join us again at the end of March for another episode of Lackawanna Pastimes, and have a lovely weekend, everyone.